Yeah. Let's see how our brass are doing. This brass is actually too quiet, which is very interesting. It just means our modulation stuff is not as aggressive for this, or not as appropriate for the East-West. So theoretically, if I were doing this, I might just grab the East-West one, grab all of this and go, let's bring it up, which sort of makes sense, except some of your dips and stuff are more extreme in terms of ratio at that point. But let's just take a listen. Don't love some of that stuff going on in there. And so theoretically, if I was playing this in, it would be better instead of me drawing it. But sometimes when I'm layering, it's not the main focus anyway. So it's just like they're not even, right? Oftentimes I'll have the main orchestra be like 75% of the sound, and the other one's just color at 25% of the sound. And then sometimes if you're really stacking libraries, you got to make that whole balance happen. But there's also an interesting thing to note that when you have a larger ensemble of any kind, all mistakes, well, not all mistakes, but most mistakes get covered up easier. And so mistakes in the programming or anything like that starts to get covered up. And so once you start adding layers, you get a little bit of that cover up too. Let's see how our trombones are doing. Let's do the same thing we did for the tuba there and actually just bring up the modulation. I don't love it, especially right there. So I'm gonna draw something a little bit smoother there. I actually don't love this trombone here, so I might actually leave it out. Especially on that note. It didn't handle this transition well. That was okay if it's blended. If it's blended, I think I can leave that in. Yeah, if anything, it actually helps to emphasize that note a little bit more. Let's see how the trumpets are doing, because with BBC, we originally had solo trumpet. Now with East-West, we have two. BBC is way warmer, way warmer. East-West. And it's this kind of stuff, it doesn't handle it as well. So again, if I was really, really being detailed with this and I knew that this was going to be a prominent part of my orchestra, I would be playing in the mod wheel on all of these. Right now, to me, it's more of a blend, and so it's not the end of the world to have the drawn version as long as there's not weird stuff like that happening. Like that. Actually, I think it's a little bit of a velocity thing too, with the East-West reacting differently. That's not bad. That's not bad. Let's check out the French horns. Yeah, that's really only going to be a color thing if I leave it the way it is right now. If I up the modulation stuff a little bit, we might get a little bit more of that. Yeah, now we definitely have more color. Let's bring it up even more. Let's see if we can really push these French horns. I really want to hear what these sound like. Yeah, this one's reacting way too much to the modulation. So I'm actually, in this situation, I am going to write it. I'm just gonna play everything and have my thumb on the mod wheel for the French horn and see what we can do. For the most part, I basically did just a smoother version because it seemed like East West was reacting harsher. So somewhere in that mid range, it was jumping too much in the sound instead of having a smoother transition. So let's see if we can hear that. I think that's gonna work for now. That's gonna color it up enough for now. I don't like how these trumpets actually started though. Yeah, there's a problem here. There's a real problem here. Let's see if we can swell into that. They're actually not reacting at the exact same time, which makes sense. So it's pretty close. Yeah. See how the East-West one? My import, that's my issue. Import on East-West didn't have a negative track delay on it, actually. And so I had to actually manually draw it in. Don't know why that one doesn't have it on it. Oh, my French horn didn't either. But my French horn actually seems to be doing okay. Very interesting. That means that the delay on the legatos for these trumpets must be a stronger delay in comparison to BBC than the French horn is. And that probably happened because my MIDI routing had negative track delays on it for the brass and winds, but my strings had it on their instrument channels, which is why it's on the instrument channels as opposed to the MIDI channels. But if you remember, I didn't import MIDI channels, I just kept an instrument channel. So that's actually probably true for every instrument going on here. Notice how we didn't super notice it though. That sounds fine. Sounds good. The trumpet was the one problematic one, which actually might indicate that we need to move all of the others before. Sometimes, though, the very first note of a legato takes a little bit longer than the transitions do, and so sometimes you don't need to adjust them. That's pretty close. I think there was like a note or two here that was slightly out of time, but and then let's go ahead and listen to our bassoons. Similar problem to the trumpet where I think the first note was slightly off, but everything else was okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and see if I can up this modulation to get it just a little bit more aggressive. That's pretty good. If you heard that, it's actually doing a more aggressive vibrato there instead. So I'm going to bring the expression up on this quite a bit. Probably not that much, a little too much. Because I want the BBC to be the core sound. Yeah, I'm actually going to lower it. Not because I don't want the color, but because the color's too much for me. I preferred the BBC sound on that one. All right, and then moving on to the clarinets. pretty good. The only thing I didn't like is when we got up here, there was a bit of vibrato that I didn't want. So I'm gonna smooth that out. Oh, is that actually the BBC one doing it? Wow, it's actually the BBC one doing it that I didn't notice. Look at that jagged modulation wheel programming. Not great. That was okay. It seems like it hits that one level. So I'm gonna actually, somewhere around there. Yeah, that's nice. A little bit's fine. And then let's go to our oboes. Those actually sound fine. Let me show the difference between them. It's warmer. It's hard to call an oboe warm ever though. Much thinner and brighter. Together. Yeah, that's why I use these two. Really like these two combined. And then we already did the flutes. Cool. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and listen to it one more time. Perfect. Now, I won't go through a whole mix process here, but if I was, I would probably be bringing the horns in and out as necessary and stuff. But for now, I'm actually going to go ahead and go to my French horns, and I actually just think I want them slightly lower so we get more wind quality. So I'm bringing both of those down. And I think everything else is okay for a general gain staging point here. I will say now that we're in this space, the gain staging is slightly off because, as I mentioned, the percussion is out of whack. The percussion is like out of whack because it's competing with a slightly larger orchestra now. So if I were to actually be gain staging this, I would probably set everything from the get-go to be like -12. And then probably have some level of gain staging shifts for these, but probably everything would just be set to level of 12 or -12, and then I'd use compressors and everything along the way. So what I will do here is actually probably just throw, I'm talking about pre-gain, I would probably set pre-gain to -12 so that it's not hitting the stereo master too strong. But for now, I might just up the gain on these a little bit. Do like 3. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, okay, very subtle, but still there. Okay, great. And now I want to go to the actual like general mix spot just for fun. This is bonus content right here for you. So let's show all channels. I'm going to go towards the end where I have my groups. We're going to save because that's what good people do. We're going to set this on a loop real quick. Then we're going to start adjusting some stuff. So right now, I'm going to lower this track. Okay, I lowered it for you guys. So right now, all the groups are hitting these reverbs. So they're hitting the Spaces reverb, which is a New York string hall with a little bit of pre-delay and a 3.4 second time on it. The the pre-delay theoretically should be different between like one instrument to another if you're trying to do things correctly, but it's not the end of the world if they just have the same pre-delay, especially unless you're getting like really, really, really into hyper-realism. It's not the end of the world to just have them on the same pre-delay. So, okay, that was actually very distracting to me. And so then I have them on another reverb, another little ambient reverb, very subtle. But these are the reverbs that everything is effectively going to because they're sent to my groups. These are all of my groups, right? High strings, low, or high woodwinds, low woodwinds, high, low, pitched, unpitched, choir, high strings, low strings, etc. Those are being sent to the reverbs, and all of these are being sent to my mix, my master and mix bus. So right now on the mix and master bus, I have an EQ, but it's not doing anything. So if I hit play, that's actually kind of a pretty good curve to start with. If you see that as your starting curve when you haven't done any EQing, you're kind of in a good spot. And that goes to show one of the most important things about scoring orchestral music and programming it with digital orchestration is that your orchestration actually is way more important than your mix. Doing a good orchestration allows the mix to sound good. If you have bad orchestration, you can't mix your way out of it. So I think this, once it loops, that's a pretty good start. So some things I might do is on basically all of the high instruments, I'm probably going to go ahead and just cut, do like a pretty strong high pass right around there for all of the high instruments. So I'm just going to copy that over to the high winds, the high brass, and the high strings. You can see I have some other stuff built in here, but and that's already going to solve some problems for us. And then we don't super need to do it for any of the lows right now because the low strings are our subs when we are doing orchestral stuff. Like our low percussion and our low strings and low brass are basically going to be the sub frequencies. And more hybrid scoring, you would cut off the bottoms so that you can do things with like sine waves doubling the strength, like a sine wave doing the same octave as your basses to really beef them up in the subs instead of having the actual string be the sub itself. And we could probably, if we take a look here at what it's going to look like right here, our curve already looks pretty decent over there if we're going based like purely off of visuals. So that's a good starting point. And then realistically, I would probably put a small amount of compression on every one of these group channels before it gets to the master. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. You might use an LA2A for one of them. And you want it hitting just like a little bit, right? So let's just put like a 2A on that and the brass. As a general rule, I don't really want it hitting more than like 7, but I definitely want to keep it right around like 3 to 5. And this is tricky, right? Because what's actually happening here, I'm going to lower both of these, is we're doing traditional orchestral music. Traditional orchestral music uses even less compression than like game scoring or something. Film scoring is not nearly compressed to the levels that we're talking about. And actually I realized that's only on the high string, so I'm just copying it with the settings on the other stuff. Maybe for the percussion, I do like a 76 instead. But you can also, you don't have to use any You don't have to use any specific compressor. These are just like the hardware emulated ones that people use in the recording industry. There's different like qualities that they provide, and that's why people like them. But realistically, you can use any compressor, stock compressors, stock EQs, everything in your digital audio workstation is just as good, but don't tell anyone I said that. Cutting some of the lows from my pitched percussion because I don't have any meaty pitched percussion, and so I hear myself compressing the lows, and that's too many lows. So I'm not fully using my ear on this. I'm sort of just doing something very quickly. Something like that. And then the mid percussion is the swell, which I don't really need to do anything on it with the swell. But if I want to be safe and just make sure I have a compressor on every bus, it's fine. Helps bring the level. It helps bring the levels up too. And then for high strings, we can just throw a 2A on it. Strings are a little more nuanced, and so I might actually throw like a 2A into a 76. Something like that. One of the other things that I might do pretty typically for like low brass is run some kind of saturation on them. There's a few different ways to do this. You can do saturation, you can do distortion. It just kind of helps give them a little bit more bite. So there's a free one, I think, from Plugin Boutique called Temper that I've used. There's another free one called BPB Saturator. That one's actually really, I use that one all the time for being free. And then you can also just use like a little bit of distortion. Let's just do the... let's go full like distortion, like but I'm only gonna do like a 10% mix on it, so let's listen. So this is what it would sound like if it was really strong. Yeah, brings a little clarity to them, doesn't it? And it's going to be actually a very similar thing for the low strings. Go ahead and do it on the low strings too. So I just copied those settings. Let it loop. Probably realizing we probably don't need, when I get to that cymbal swell, can probably just cut off a bunch of the lows there too. This is very, very basic like EQ stuff that I'm doing right now. This is not picking out the bad nodes and all that kind of mess. This is pretty straightforward stuff. Cool. So now that we're here, if you'll notice, I actually already do have some stuff on my mastering chain. There's an EQ, but it's not doing anything yet, as I mentioned. There's an SSL bus compressor, and then there's a Studer. So this is a tape saturator, and typically having a tape saturation just glues everything together. So I just want to show you guys what this sounds like. Like that sounds okay at the tape. Now it really sounds like it's actually one sound. And then add the little bus compressor. If we check our levels, We're at like we're right at like averaging negative 14 basically, which is kind of what you want for that. The other option for basic mastering that I would potentially do, and this might crash my system because it's AI involved and I'm running a recording thing in the background. So hopefully it won't, but please protect your ears. I'm going to actually delete this instance of Ozone, but I'm going to load up a fresh instance of Ozone. This is the advanced version, but the free Elements version can do a similar thing. And I'm going to go to this little button here, and it's going to ask me to play a bit of the music and then basically it'll come up with its own mastering chain that it thinks is good. It's probably not good, but it'll be close to something, and it'll load up a bunch of stuff for you. So let's hit play and then... So it did not handle that well. Obviously, it thought it was pop, and so it's like trying to match a pop record. I'll go over to Cinematic and see if that fixes anything. It added a whole bunch of clarity and top end. See, it did some really whack stuff over here that I don't fully agree with in the EQ, but Ozone is a great way to get your basic mastering for this kind of stuff under your belt, because it'll start you in a reasonably good spot. As at the very least, it'll get you to good levels if you're using like Ozone Elements, which I think is free. It might be like $50, but I think it goes like quote unquote on sale for free all the time. But it will detect frequency ranges for things like impact, which is important. You can check your stereo imaging and the ranges for that. Generally, you don't want anything too stereo in the super low sub frequency. But obviously you have low strings on your right, high strings on your left. It's doing a little bit too much clarity work for me. It's adding too much of that crisp high end. Don't even want that on there. And then of course it's a maximizer, so it's upwards compressing everything and then bringing the gain up so that you're at proper levels. And let's see what levels it put us at just from the get-go. Yeah, quite a bit louder, right? It brought us to like -9 LUFS, which is totally fine. You can use Ozone for that kind of stuff. I typically do a hybrid of things. Nowadays I lean towards using like a bus compressor into a Studer and then into Ozone and try to get a result that way. But you can do whatever you want. So that's the basics of getting a good layering sound. Oh, also, one final thing that I just thought of, not to rabbit trail, but I do think my panning is slightly too narrow, more narrow than I want it. So I'm just gonna adjust it here real quick as I listen to this one more time, going back to the old settings with the SSL bus compressor and the Studer. Somewhere around there is probably where I would be taking this. Very, very micro amounts of panning. I'm not even sold on that entirely. I might even do less than that. I just know before they were almost too centered. And so I didn't want all of that going on. And that's the thing, is you can see it. So you can see the actual imaging. If I turn off everything except for imager, you can see what you're actually hearing. Yeah. And you can actually bring your high frequencies and your high mids up and down and stuff. So yeah. All right. That was a little bit more than just layering instruments, but I think that was a clear objective of what we got. We went from a reasonably sounding thing to it's a bit fuller, a bit more majestic, if you will, something like that. So yeah, I'll just, to close this out here, I will just mute everything before. It's not going to be entirely the same. You can always go listen to the old file. But if I mute all of the new instruments that we have in here that are supposed to be the layers, remember there's still compression and reverb and stuff happening, and then compare it to the new version. Unmuting. And by doing that and panning my violins to the further left, I now heard some automation in here that sounds a little bit fake. And so that's one of those things. You're going to hear it and then you're going to be like, oh, I have to cover that up, or I have to adjust it and do things on the fly. So yeah, that's layering instruments 101 or something like that. I don't know what I'm calling this one. But yeah, thanks for watching.